Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Aliens and UFOs video. Well, it's time to wrap up this series, at least for this go around, give it a brief rest, and then start focusing on other type of series that I have here. So thank you so much again for your suggestions, everyone. Please keep them coming whenever I have a new set of videos regarding aliens and UFOs. This one actually just has to do with a random one that I came across the other day, and I thought I would gladly share it with everyone here, mainly because it's actually a great tie back to one of my earliest videos when I first started my channel that had to do with atmospheric beasts. In fact, I'll include the link for it below. It's one of my more popular videos too, and it's because this particular UFO could actually be cross-mixed with also being an atmospheric beast. I always loved that particular topic, the idea that some kind of animal, if you could call it that, is living between certain sections of the atmosphere. And so in this case, when I was reading this information, I thought what a great way to go over that piece of info that I just talked about a couple years back or so, and then tie it to this story here. So let's go ahead and let's talk about this particular entry. It's got a unique name, I hope I'm saying that correctly, but it's known as the Qing Xian flying jellyfish. So let's go ahead and let's share that info here, and then that way you get to decide, was this an atmospheric beast or was it truly a UFO sighting? So what was this Qing Xian flying jellyfish? Well, it was something that occurred back almost 20 plus years ago, October 19th, 1998 to be specific, there in Qing Xian, China. And at that time, I don't know exactly if it was during the day or night. I'll explain more on that here in a minute, but something definitely caught the eye, not just of some military stations that were nearby, not just of some pilots there too that were flying towards this particular entity, but also some people on the ground too. In fact, there were over 140 people that ended up seeing this particular object. So lots of eyewitnesses with regards to this brief encounter. So here's what occurred. On October 19th, 1998, there again in Qing Xian, China, there's a set of military radar stations, 4 of them to be specific, known in an area called Hebei province. And during that time period, all 4 of them started registering what could be described as an unidentified blip. So whatever this was, it was definitely hovering above their area, particularly a military flight training school in a type of, I don't know if it's a town or a type of province, something called Shangzhou, and then that's when they were alerted to it. They couldn't tell, though, if it was exactly something along the lines of a foreign intruder or if it was something else entirely different, but the authorities decided, they're going to go check this out, whether it's civilian or whether it's military. Something was definitely still there, hovering above their bases. So the base commander ordered what was known as the Jiangeo 6 jet fighter to take off and then to try to intercept whatever this thing was. And this aircraft contained 2 people. One of them was the captain, and then the other one was a radar officer, or a pilot, I'm sorry, and then a radar officer. And as they grew closer to this particular entity, they came across this. This is, I believe, actually a picture associated of the creature. And to them, at first they thought it was a small star. In fact, a lot of the people on the ground were also seeing this object because they were also alerted as to what this was. And so at first they thought it was just a tiny star just nonchalantly out there in the sky, but the fact that it started to grow larger and larger, indicating that it was going towards a lower altitude, then that's of course what definitely not just alerted them, but also gave them a clear definition of what it looked like. In fact, here's how they described it. They described it as something looking like an object, something along the lines of either a mushroom or something along the lines of a jellyfish. And then it was translucent, and it had these weird dangling things on the bottom that had lights as well. So whether these were appendages or some other type of objects just coming down from this jellyfish-like object, whatever it was definitely emitting its own source of light. And so this pilot and then this radar officer intercepted it, but they found a curious thing. The closer they got to this particular creature. In fact, they got as close to about 4,000 meters or so. It started acting intelligently. In other words, it started to evade their particular interception. So it would shoot upwards and then it would just evade left and right, up and down. No matter how many times this experienced pilot was able to try to get as close as possible, there it was, almost with an ease, just going faster and easily outmaneuvering them than any kind of speed that they would try to match. So whatever this thing was, the way it was described, it was toying with them by continuously outdistancing from them and then also reappearing right next to them. I don't know if it was teleporting or if it was just moving so quickly that it seemed like it was, but still it was absolutely catching the pilot and the radar officer by surprise. So lo and behold, after this was going on for a good time period, it seemed like the pilot started to get a little annoyed and he requested permission to fire on whatever this was. At this point, they still didn't know if it was still something along the lines of, again, something civilian, something military, or because of how extraordinary it looked, something else completely different, like a UFO or some other type of entity altogether. But still, he wanted to go ahead and shoot it to try to bring it down. He was denied this. Instead, he was just given the order by the commanding officer at that base to just continue monitoring the situation, just continue following it, and then that way they'll be able to get more info on it. At this point, though, it seemed like this UFO or this atmospheric beast, whatever it was, this jellyfish decided it had enough. It started to go upwards, and it started to go pretty high, over 12,000 meters, which is almost 40,000 feet up in the air. And at this turning point, that was enough for the pilot. They couldn't catch up anymore simply because they were running low on fuel. So they had been following it for such a long time period that there really wasn't much else they could do. I think it's called the point of no return when it comes to certain fuel gauges. And so when that happened, they had to not evacuate or not retreat, but they just essentially had to go back to make sure that nothing happened to them. But the base was actually ordering not just one, but two more fighter planes to take their place. And at that point, this particular, whatever this was, it was atmospheric beast or UFO or something else different, it definitely had enough because it was gone. It disappeared very, very quickly. I don't know if it moved very fast, just straight up into the air, or if it just disappeared, like outright, just 100% poof, and it's gone. In other words, it's there one moment and it's gone the next. Or if it moved at such a quick speed, let's say into the far distance, that there was no way that you could see it from one moment to the other. Either way, though, it was gone before these other two planes arrived. And then that was it. That was pretty much the only encounter associated with this entity. Whatever this thing was it a jellyfish? Was it a mushroom? Was it a floating atmospheric beast? Was it a UFO? Was it military? Was it civilian? No one really knows. There was a lot of speculation at that time, not just from obviously the military base and the people that saw it too, but it was picked up by several publications there. In fact, there was a news magazine called the Baokan Wenzai, and apparently they're not really too prone to go into such extreme stories like this, but considering the cat and mouse chase that occurred, and then the fact that this thing, whatever it was toying around with them, and it had so many witnesses, they just couldn't deny talking about it at the time, which apparently went against the military base. They didn't want that information really spread out as far as this. There was going to be investigation into what occurred, and I'm sure they probably came up with something else to try to see if there was more info on that, but I couldn't find it. But they didn't want this getting out of hand, like having someone else, any other type of newspaper, someone else to talk about it. The fact that it remained quiet, it goes to show this. The pilot's name, the radar officer's name, the commander base's name, none of them seem to be known. Whatever this was, it was kept very, very silent after this encounter, even from the fact that so many other people saw it. So to this day, a lot of it just remains mysterious as ever. And it still remains also the only known encounter, at least in that particular area. So atmospheric beast, what a unique set of circumstances. No, I remember too, when I was talking about it in my other video, how there was one time like an Art Bell show and they were having some guy on and he was talking about how there's different levels of these atmospheric beasts. It just depends on the higher you go or the lower you go on the atmosphere, then you run into different type of atmosphere. It's kind of like if you go to any type of ocean, there's sea life at the top level, and then the deeper you go, there's other forms of sea life. That seemed to be the case with this set of beasts that are out there in the sky. So I remember that introduced me to that world, and I was so happy to talk about it all those years back in my own video. In fact, there was one more video I talked about, one that was a Russian encounter involving atmospheric beasts, and I'll include that link below too in case you wanted to see it. But what do you guys think as far as this entry here involving this jellyfish? Was it a UFO? Was it atmospheric fish? Was it something else entirely different? Please let me know in those comments below. There's still lots of speculations as to what it was, but no real concrete answer. And honestly, it doesn't look like the government there is going to look into it. Like, in other words, it's probably that notion of, yeah, we'll get back to you when it comes to finding out the answers of what this was. It almost seems like let bygones be bygones, and they don't want to go into further details. So whether we'll have a final answer on this, probably not, but still, at least with regards to that encounter, it was documented and a lot of people saw it, and so it was fascinating to be able to talk about it here. So, but anyone that has any comments, anyone by that area there in China maybe knows more information, maybe there was another set of encounters that occurred with this type of jellyfish type entity, please post those comments below. All right, everyone, thanks again as always. Take care.